All right, I think we're ready to get started then. So thank you everybody again, or thank you for the first time if you're just joining for the info session. If you missed the pitch presentation, which just completed about 10-15 minutes ago, there will be a recording available on our YouTube channel. So just check out our YouTube channel later on when you want to kind of view that. And if you have any kind of problem or anything, feel free to email me and I can get you that link or one of the other staff from IRI, and we can get you the link for the YouTube channel. If you missed the IRI pitch presentation, it was awesome. Everybody did a great job. So it is well worth your time to kind of take a look at it. I really feel like the students really are kind of setting the standard of what it means to do a great pitch. So it was really great to see, and it's worth your time. And as I said, just let me know if you need the link for that. I'll be glad to help. Now we're going to move into an info session. This is going to go, roughly around 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. Definitely be plenty of time for questions at the end. And so I would ask that you please hold your questions until the end. I'll be presenting. And then also mute your microphone, please. There will be plenty of time to ask questions at the end. On the other hand, if something occurs to you and you're like, oh man, I might forget that question, I might forget that question, feel free to type it into the chat window while I'm speaking, and either I'll answer it at the end, or if it's something quick, perhaps one of the staff will answer the question for you. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Bob Malkin. I'm a professor of the practice of biomedical engineering and global health at Duke University, and I'm also the executive director of the International Research Institute of North Carolina. And for this info session, I'm going to be talking about IRI's programs. So let's start just a little bit to understand where the programs kind of fit into the world that we live in. Harvard, UPenn, and many other universities, including my own university, have said that research, specifically substantial scholarship, is usually the words that are chosen, can really make a difference in a college application. So this brings up, quite a few questions right off the bat. Like, what type of research are they talking about and why? Why does research matter? What does this all mean? So let's just talk for a minute, first of all, about what type of research we're talking about. When myself or someone from a university says research, what they do mean is scholarly research, as opposed to, for example, research you might conduct for your job, or maybe a biology paper that you have due in high school or something like that. Usually distinguished with three things. First of all, the methods. You should have a consistent, reproducible method. Even if you're just doing a literature review, you should be able to describe what you did with so much detail that I could repeat your method and get exactly the same results. Second, you should be using primary sources. Depending on your field, this could be different. I'm in the field of engineering. Primary sources are original research papers in journals. In other fields, it can be different. It can be pieces of art. It could be diaries. It could be translations or original manuscripts. But the point is, it's not literature reviews, magazine articles, Wikipedia, Google searches, things like that, AI generated data. That is not a primary source. And the third, especially when we're talking about high school students, it should be written up in a formal, meaning specific and traceable format. That means sentences aren't vague. You're not seeing terms like bigger, better. These terms don't have specific meaning. And when you make a statement, that statement has a reference, a citation. You're standing on the shoulders of someone else. Now, that doesn't answer the second question, though. Why? Why does my university, I did admissions for a couple of years at Duke, read thousands of files, and why are we looking for research? It's actually not that big of a mystery. We have always been looking for the ability to clearly express oneself, the ability to make a technical point. I teach in engineering, but it's critical that my students are able to communicate well, both written and oral, and research requires that ability, especially if you've published in a peer-reviewed, archived, impact factor rated paper, journal. You clearly have the ability to express yourself. Also, we've always looked for people who have clear reasoning. So it's clear expression of thought, but also clear reasoning, clear ability to think. And again, research, the ability to do research communicates that you have the ability to reason clearly. Also, other things, especially long-term research projects, show commitment, the ability to stick with and even overcome a difficult task, work in teams. So there are lots of skills which we have always been looking for in applications, which a research project can quickly express. Now, a subset of that is remote research. I tell everyone, and I'll be glad to tell you this in this talk, I'll be glad to tell you this. You should, as if you are a student, or you should, if you are an IEC, recommend to your students to do live, in-person, on-campus research. That is the goal, to get a live, in-person, on-campus research with a professor. Problem is, that's actually really difficult. Those positions are quite competitive. Even in big cities like, New York or LA or some other big city, it can be really difficult to find these positions. I myself, I'm in Durham, North Carolina at Duke University, and during the season, I might get 20 applications per day from students that want to work in my lab. So these positions are very competitive. And that doesn't even deal with students who are in a rural part of the country, in a country where there aren't laboratory opportunities. Perhaps they're doing sports and music and other activities, so time is a challenge. There are lots of other reasons why doing an in-person on-campus activity is just not reasonable. It's not possible. In that case, a remote research opportunity might make sense. It's a second choice, but for many students, it's the only choice. Just to be clear, when I talk about a remote research opportunity, what I'm talking about is no physical meeting with mentors. And just so you know, at least according to ProPublica, an article a few years ago, there's like tens of thousands of students per year doing these remote research opportunities. So this is quite realistic as a possibility. It's a real thing. And they can be quite expensive. I'll just mention here, ProPublica claimed the costs were like $2,500 to $10,000 in 2023. IRI's lowest price is $995, by the way. Now, there are a lot of concerns that people talk to me about when we talk about remote research. And let me just get the biggest one on the table right away, which is, well, how can I do research? Research involves, like this picture. Look at the picture. People in white coats, wearing gloves, wearing the eye protection, in a super clean lab, touching chemicals, smelling things. Yes, that is one view of research. And yes, you can't do that kind of research remotely. But there are lots and lots of other types of research. I myself am in biomedical engineering. Lots of my research is clinical. None of my students are doctors. All of my students are either engineers or even studying to or want to be engineers. They clearly do not have a license to start prodding people and poking them and taking measurements. Plus, never mind, they don't know how to run an MRI machine or X-ray machine or EKG machine. So for them, they were always having other people gather their data. And this is true basically across all of the clinical fields. That's a huge bunch of research. Clinical fields is a huge bunch of research. Also, there's a fair number of students doing theoretical work. At IRI, for example, we have theoretical mathematicians, we have theoretical physicists. They're doing a lot of, well, theoretical work. They're not doing measurements. They're doing computer simulations, mathematical solutions to problems. It's theoretical work. Again, none of that work ever depended on wearing gloves, eye protection and gowns. And even in the other fields of STEM, there are still students doing survey work, interview-based work, observational work, and other types of work that do not require in-person observations or in-person measurements. So the answer to here is mixed. Yes, there is a limited number of things you can do remotely. There is a limit, uh, but that still leaves a huge amount that can be done remotely. Now, there are some points to consider, however. If you're thinking about doing a remote research activity, it doesn't matter with whom you're thinking of doing that remote activity. I just want to mention that there are some things to consider. There's four basic points that I want to talk about. And when you're making the decision between potentially many different remote opportunities, you're going to want to think about these 4 points. Let's talk about mentorship first. That's the first of the 4 points. Mentorship really matters. Research is basically an apprenticeship program. It is across all fields. Students enter my lab, perhaps as high school students, perhaps as undergraduates, maybe as graduate students, and they're learning from other students in the lab. Of course, they're reading papers. Of course, they're watching, they're observing, but they are not watching YouTube videos to learn how to do my methods. What they're doing is learning from others in the lab. That's where mentorship really matters. I strongly recommend a mentor who is a or as a professor. And by professor, I do mean professor with a capital P, meaning that's in their title. They're not just like professor, kind of fuzzy naming thing. They have the title of professor, typically assistant, associate, or simply professor, which is also called full professor at a university. This title means that they have some sort of permanent or semi-permanent connection to that university. The university is committed to them. They have, especially if you're looking at associate and full professors, significant amount of a background and experience with students with success. I just cannot tell you how many times I am approached by parents or students who have received mentorship, sometimes from other organizations, sometimes they just randomly. Their cousin's friend's uncle was a graduate student and they hung out with them for a few months. Now they want to continue and they cannot because they received bad mentorship. In an apprentice environment, which is research, mentorship really, really matters far more than what university they're from, what their background is. So look for a great mentor and really, really watch out for titles like graduate student candidate, professor candidate, or PhD candidate, PhDs, PhD students. These people are not professors. They do not have an extensive background in mentorship. Watch out for those titles when you select a mentor. Program type. There are basically two different kinds of program types, and I want to separate them out. This is a little confusing in the marketplace because the title of the program doesn't really indicate the content. But I can tell you from the admissions side of the table, when we're reading folders, we definitely know the difference. There are basically two types of programs. Introductory programs. Those are basically any type of program that less than 6 months, approximately. And in-depth program. In-depth programs are in the range of 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, or even more. Generally, introductory programs are going to have a deliverable of a literature review, sometimes less than that even. And generally, in-depth programs are going to have a deliverable of a publication, a peer-reviewed, archived, impact factor rated publication. Just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with both types of programs. Both types of programs are fine, but don't look at the title. In other words, even if the title says advanced, in-depth, incredibly, super excellent research opportunity, but it's 2 months long, that's an introductory program. Doesn't matter what the title says. And it is absolutely true, as you probably have already guessed, introductory programs do not have as much impact on a college application as in-depth programs. Remember all the things I mentioned at the beginning of why we look at these types of experiences in applications? Most of those things were shown with in-depth research, not with the introductory programs. Again, just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with doing both. There's nothing wrong with doing only one of the two. And in fact, introductory programs play a really important role in sort of the evolution of one's consideration of research and where you want to drive your own research experience. But don't mix them up. They're different and they have a different impact on a college application. Next thing I want to mention about format, there are basically two formats out there. One is individual, meaning one-on-one mentorship, and the other is group, meaning two or more students for a single mentor. Again, there's not a problem with one or another. They're both great formats. They're both good formats. Um, but there is a difference between them. If you're in an individual situation, a one-on-one mentorship is what I mean by individual, then you really get to know your professor. And again, I recommend a professor for your mentor. You really get to know your professor. They're going to write a better letter of recommendation for you because they know you better. They're going to be able to speak more to your abilities because they know them better. If you're in a group, there's nothing wrong with a group. Group presentations and group research programs are just fine. There's nothing wrong with those programs. But I do want to caution, even in a group program, make sure you have independence of thought. When you get in a when you get in an interview, let's say, for or college admissions, let's say, um, the questions are going to be asked about your research. Deal with what did you do? What did you learn about yourself? How did you grow during that experience? Those questions deal with your independence during that research activity, specifically your independence of thought. So you want to make sure, even if you're in a group, that you can clearly define your research question. This is what I did. As long as you're doing that, there's nothing really wrong with a group. In fact, there are some pretty good reasons to do a group. Last one I want to talk about, and I just want to spend a couple minutes on this one, is publication because I get so many questions about this, and there is so much bad information out there about publication. First of all, let me just say right at the top, the number one thing I want to say is I hear frequently, bah, admissions departments, they don't know the difference. One publication, another publication, it's all the same. No. Let me 100% tell you that is wrong. Admissions departments definitely know the difference between a good publication and a bad publication. It was one of my jobs as Associate Director of Undergraduate Studies in the engineering school when I was at Duke, to review application folders when a student claimed a publication. If I got a folder on my desk and a student claimed a publication, but in fact it was not peer-reviewed, archived, and impact factor rated, I let the admissions department know that is not a publication. Claimed, but not real. Presumably, those applications were rejected. The admissions department absolutely knows the difference. I've now conducted interviews with about 15 different admissions departments and many, many, many more admissions officers. Most admissions departments have exactly the same system. When in doubt, they contact a faculty member to review that publication. Admissions departments absolutely know the difference. Let me also make a second point right at the top here. This is not an easy area. It's actually pretty difficult to get a good publication, to even know where to submit it, how to respond to reviewers, how to handle galleys. I just submitted a paper with a student about 5 hours ago. It took us about 3 hours just to get the submission right, just so that we felt it would be competitive for that journal, not to do the research. That's just the moment of submitting the article. Never mind selecting the journal. That also took us many weeks to select this journal. Actually, we've been working on it for probably a month just to select the right journal. This is not trivial. You really need a mentor. You really need a great mentor. And I haven't even started to talk about all the mistakes you can make here. Copyright, intellectual property, and these mistakes can follow you throughout your career. You probably all know, or maybe you don't, the president of Harvard lost her job partially because she didn't handle a publication correctly when she was a student 30 years earlier. So you really, really need a mentor. These are the two top things I want you to know about publications. If you don't remember anything about publications, those are the two top things. You really need a great mentor, somebody with a significant depth of publication with students. And admissions departments absolutely do know the difference. So what is the difference? Let me now make the main point. What is the difference? There are basically two types of things that people call publications. One is I would call real, meaning it has some impact on your college application for this discussion of what real is, and not real. Not real is junior science or private label publications. These are publications, private label publications, or publications that are owned and operated and often even reviewed by a company which also offers research experiences. It's not the only type, but it's the most common type of private label journal. Junior science journals are usually journals that are reviewed by peers, but the peers are junior scientists, high school students, college students, things like that. When I talk about peer review, I'm talking about my peers, experienced faculty in the field. So these are peer reviewed, but they're peer reviewed by junior scientists. Just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with a junior science journal. There's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with a private label journal for that matter. But absolutely make sure you label it that way in your college application. As I said, if I got a folder on my desk, somebody who claimed a publication, but in fact it was a junior science publication, I absolutely alerted the admissions department to that, and I assume that they were rejected after that. As opposed to uh, peer-reviewed, archived, or sometimes called indexed, impact factor rated journals. This is what you're looking for. These are the real journal articles. So what my graduate students and postdocs publish in, it's where I publish. That's what, when we look at a folder for college applications and perhaps a student claims a publication or we're just looking for publications, that's what we're looking for. Archived, peer-reviewed, impact factor rated. If you have any questions about this, you can go to the IRI website. It's iri-nc.org, and I'll pop that in the chat window later on, iri-nc.org. And you can go under our publications section, and there's a little drop down there near the bottom. You can pop that up. It looks comparing journals or something like that. And it has a step-by-step technique that you can use to determine whether a journal that you're either reading or your students are considering or you are considering, to make sure that it's peer-reviewed, archived, and impact factor rated. It's the same three steps, although I've updated it. It's the same three steps that I used and I still use when I'm evaluating a student's folder. And this is just an example. This is there's another organization. This is what they list on their website for publications. Presumably that means it's the best that they have to offer. None of those are publications. This is one of our competitors, I guess you would call it. At least it's a peer in any case. Their best, none of them are publications. Hopefully, none of those students are claiming those as publications on their college applications. On the right are just some of the publications from our website, and you can go look at many more. Again, that's iri-nc.org. All of those are publications, what a college admissions committee would call a publication. I just want to mention one other thing, and then I'm going to talk about a few projects just to give some examples and then wrap this up and give you guys time to ask questions. Um, I get a lot of questions about pay to play. Pay to play is this concept that um, you have the money to pay for a remote research opportunity, and you don't get to participate if you don't have the money. That is actually quite true. In most cases, that is true. In fact, if you want to go to college, you got to pay to play. There actually are very few free things in life, and a lot of those are kind of suspect. So this is real. You do often have to pay to participate in these programs. Um, it's not it is changing the landscape, absolutely changing landscape. As many of you know, the Common App now asks to mention the placement agency if you use the placement agency for your laboratory. If it's not asked, then don't mention the placement agency at all. Even if the placement agency tells you, well, it is just an honor to be selected. And by the way, pay us this tuition fee. It is not an honor. So don't even mention, just say I worked in laboratory A, as a laboratory assistant with Dr. X at University Y. That's all you need to mention. However, I just want to put out there all of the opportunities here for pay or pay to play, and the universities you're applying to are pay to play. You don't get to go to those universities for free. So I think this is kind of an overblown point. I'm not saying it's not a point at all, but there is kind of a little too much here. If it's never asked and people don't tell you, don't mention it. If you get a job at, IBM, you don't mention monster.com on your CV. It's not relevant, and it's not natively relevant here either. All right, let me just give you a few examples. I don't think I'll go through all of these, but just a couple. This is a study that I did with a student, a high school student named Sanjana. When she was in high school, I have since met her since she went to Duke University, but I never met her when we were doing the research. It was done completely remotely. She did the research on vaping and the effect of vaping on the immune system. She used cold and flu symptoms as a surrogate for the immune system. And she surveyed, I don't remember, 1,000, 2,000 people. And indeed, she found that people who vape have more frequent colds and flus. And the more they vaped, the worse their cold and flu symptoms, suggesting that vaping, in fact, is causing suppression of the immune system. An interesting side note, she originally hypothesized that nicotine was the cause. It had no effect. Nicotine was not the cause. Presumably, it was just the vaping device itself, which is full of heavy metals, which presumably get into the lungs and therefore suppress the immune system. Great paper. And Sanjana is a great student, went to Duke and did a great job. She's actually graduated. Here's another one, Ishta. Ishta also did research with me when she was a high school student. Also never met her while she was doing the research. Also went to Duke University, and so I certainly have met her since then. Ishta looked at meter dose inhalers. These are little devices that we send children to school with that they can stick in their mouth and give themselves a little bit of meds if they have asthma and they're having an attack. Question is, do the kids know how to use the device? Turns out there is no data available on this. So Ishta wrote a program so that moms could use their cell phones to determine whether the children were using the devices correctly. And in fact, Ishta showed that more than 90% of the students, kids, did not know how to use their devices correctly. And she also showed those that used them better and those that used them correctly had better health outcomes, better sleep, better grades in school, and things like that. So a really significant piece of research, which has opened up a new avenue that Isha and I are still talking about, developing a device for better training of children to correctly use their metered dose inhalers. This is a work that I did not participate in. Ryan did this with Dr. Rodriguez. I just wanted to mention this one because it was a completely theoretical work in the area of math, looking at latent growth curve modeling. Super interesting area. And this area would never have needed in person. This is an area where this would always have been done without an in-person component. And Ryan did a great job, published in Stats, excellent journal. I think I'm going to skip some of these. So let me finish up here just by talking about IRI specifically. A lot of what I've been talking about so far is just remote research in general. Now let me talk about IRI specifically. IRI has two basic types of programs which mirror the two basic types of programs that exist. Introductory programs, which you call the introduction or introductory programs, and the research assistant programs. The introductory programs are shorter, usually lasting around 8 weeks or so. And the research assistant programs are longer, usually lasting around 1, 2, maybe 3 years. The introduction programs are going to have as their primary deliverable either a collected medical case study, if you're in the introduction to medical case studies, or a literature review, if you're in the introduction to research to research literature program. You will get to work mostly with graduate students, but all IRI students work with a faculty from the US or Canada. All IRI students in all programs work with a faculty member from either the US or Canadian university. The research assistant program, again, you always work with a faculty, again, with the research assistant program, but it's a much longer and much more intense relationship that you're going to develop with your faculty member if you decide to join the research assistant program. And the goal is to publish in a peer-reviewed, archived, impact factor rated journal. Just to kind of compare those maybe in a little bit more graphical way, all research basically has the same steps. All of our programs map onto those steps a little bit differently. So the Introduction to Research program only covers those first two steps, developing a question and doing the literature review. Everybody's research starts there. My graduate students, faculty, school students, everybody, first two steps. That's the Introduction to Research. Now you can the assistant program, the original data program. In that case, you write methods, research approval, gather data, analyze a manuscript, all the steps that you probably consider to be kind of standard for research. But we also have an existing data program. Remember, I mentioned, like, for example, our clinical programs, those students would never gather the data. Could be examples of existing still mapped on this framework, but you go from literature review and directly jump to analyze. The gathering was done by someone else. Write up the manuscript and publish it. We do have a couple other programs I want to mention. Find Your Passion program. That's really geared typically for a younger student who's just getting started in science. Maybe could be even an eighth grader, maybe a ninth grader. Perhaps they're just like, man, I like science, but I don't know where to go with it. Find Your Passion is a great program there. That allows you to kind of explore some ideas, develop some ideas into research questions, and begin the process of developing a question. You don't develop a question here, but you begin that process developing a question. It's also a great way to kind of easily, it's a short commitment, just a few weeks, gets you on an introduction to also working in a research environment, meeting with graduate students, meeting with faculty, engaging intellectually, debating and reasoning, looking at things like databases. So Find Your Passion is a great program for a younger student, typically, to get started. And we also have the Pathway to Publication program. That's appropriate for two different types of students. The idea here is that you've done some work, usually those first two steps, developed a question, done a literature review. Now you're ready to take it to the next step, but you're not sure how. Pathway to Publication helps you get from, okay, I've got the question, I've got the literature review, and I want to go all the way to a systematic review, a publishable systematic review, meaning in a peer-reviewed, archived, impact factor rated paper publication. Usually this is a systematic review, meaning this is a consensus document. These play a very important role in science. Science is a consensus body. Decisions are made by consensus, often captured in the systematic review. That's the Pathway to Publication program. Doesn't matter whether you did that short-term program where you developed the question in literature review with some other organization, on your own, in high school with IRI. That doesn't matter. One thing I want to mention specifically about IRI is that if you are part of the RA program, you have absolutely unlimited number of sessions, unlimited time. I have a student who right now I'm working with for 6 years. Actually, now we're going to enter our 7th year together. So I met her when she was a sophomore in high school. She's now just about to be, well, in the fall anyways, a junior in college, and we're still working together. Unlimited sessions, unlimited time. We support you until your paper is published. Research takes time. You know, it's research. You're going to run into things that aren't expected. It's not realistic to both think you're going to do a significant piece of work and keep a perfect schedule. And we understand that. Unlimited sessions, unlimited time. We support you as long as it takes. I don't think I'm going to go through our faculty. We have lots of them. If you're interested in finding out who our faculty are, you can get onto our website, iri-nc.org. Just click on mentors and you can read about our faculty. Just kind of wrap this up, just kind of with a comparison here. So in the IRI world, you have the Find Your Passion program. Absolutely no prior experience required. You don't have any, even have to have a clear view of what you want to do. You're just getting started. You'll absolutely work with faculty. All IRI students work with faculty, and it's a very short-term program. Our introduction to research literature and our introduction to medical case studies, both in the range of 4 to 8 weeks, just doing those first couple of things. Develop a question, write the literature review, or the collected medical case study. Then we have the research assistant program, both the original data, that's where you do all the steps, 2, 3 years, and the existing data, typically around the 1 year mark, and you publish peer-reviewed, archived, impact factor rated journal. And we also have the Pathway to Publication or P2P program. That program also leads to publication. It's a little bit shorter because you've already developed a couple of the steps, but in general, you're looking at a systematic review there. Alrighty, I'm going to wrap up here with our presentation. We have programs starting every week of the year, except for around Christmas. So if you're interested, again, it's iri-nc.org. And I am now going to stop sharing my screen, and I'll give you guys a chance to ask any questions.